to provide support, military support, or try to launch an offensive to retake Tripoli. That will be a very, in my view, a dangerous and a scenario that they should not engage in. Time is on the side of the people of Tripoli. With continued defections, greater international pressure, the isolation of the regime, I think it's only a matter of time before a major event takes place and leads to the ouster of Gaddafi from his rule.
Yeah, I mean, this is the question, that as he loses the support of people in Tripoli, and as you say, defections of top officials, but he still has that very close core of people around him. How long is it going to take, or what will it take for them to peel away? Because they now have UN sanctions and the threat of ICC referrals on them.
They don't have, I don't think they're fighting. The commanders around him, they're not fighting with conviction. They're not fighting with morale. They're fighting to protect their interests. Should the international community provide them with an exit option that helps at least safeguard their exit, their decision to defect, they are more likely with time on the side of the protests, on the side of the opposition. They're more likely to leave Gaddafi. And that would just leave the scenario of Gaddafi being hunkered down in a military camp. Then it becomes a matter of a commander around him taking matters in his own hand, or the protests essentially closing in on the part of Tripoli in which Gaddafi and his children are hunkered down at the moment.
Does that scale down Gaddafi's ability to retake the cities which have fallen to protesters?
Very much so. It's also the case, we should remember, that Libya's military units are not part of a professional army. This is not a military with a centralized command and control structure. It is a series of desperate units fighting under independent commanders, creating the very option that defections take place. Regrouping is difficult, challenging, and so a major offensive to retake the parts of the country that have fallen out of their control presents an organizational and an institutional challenge that is much bigger than the problems they face on the ground at the moment.
Tariq, as ever, good to speak with you. Tariq Youssef there. Well, the international pressure on Colonel Gaddafi is mounting. Let's get more on that from Felicity Barr in our London News Centre. Felicity.
That's right, Shirley. Thanks very much. Asset freezes, arms embargoes and travel bans are emerging as the weapons that other countries are employing against the Libyan leadership. European Union ministers in Brussels have approved their own package of sanctions. And in Geneva, foreign ministers from across the world met under the auspices of the UN Human Rights Council. Well, AlJazeera's Nick Spicer is there for us now. And Nick, some strong words were said at that meeting.
Absolutely. Lots of warnings to Muammar Gaddafi and a remarkable show of unity here amongst diplomats and satisfaction that the Human Rights Council, which has long been accused of being toothless, decided to suspend Libya and to order an international investigation into events there. Satisfaction as well, as you were saying, that the United Nations Security Council voted over the weekend a series of measures against Libya. Although there was unity, there was also an urgent message to the Libyan leader.
You know, we have to do whatever we can right now to try and support people. The calls that we make, the desire to see the violence stop, to stop the repression, are real, and as much action as we can take now, we're going to try and do. And we recognise that that's going to be so important. It's also going to be important to get ready for the humanitarian aid, and that we're also getting ready to move on. But our thoughts are with the people of Libya right now.
Now, the United States has been pushing hard for sanctions and other measures against Libya, pushing the European Union notably. And the European Union has adopted measures in Monday in Brussels, basically lining up with the United Nations sanctions. Hillary Clinton, the American Secretary of State, joined the top diplomats here, and she had a message herself for Muammar Gaddafi, which was that even if the violence stops, he's not off the hook.
We want the violence to end. And if the violence could be ended by his leaving and ending the killing of so many people who are trying to assert their rights, you know, that might be a good step. But of course, we believe accountability has to be obtained for what he has done. And certainly, I don't think that the international community given the unanimity with the Security Council resolution, would just drop all of its concerns were he to leave.
We know also, of course, behind closed doors that military options such as no-fly zones are being talked about and probably not talked about in public because there is no consensus. Meanwhile, the diplomatic public steps will continue Tuesday when the United Nations General Assembly will likely vote to suspend Libya from the Human Rights Council. Felicity?
Nick Spicer in Geneva, thanks so much for that. Well, that rather lengthy speech from Hillary Clinton comes as the US hardens its stance against the Libyan regime. For more on that, we can cross to Nick Clark. He's in our Washington, D.C. news centre. Nick.
Yeah, Felicity, Clinton said that, quote, all options remain on the table in regards to the situation in Libya. The US Secretary of State also said that the US is prepared to send humanitarian assistance to the Libyan people if needed. Her comments came as the US President Barack Obama is due to meet the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at the White House at some point this afternoon. For more, let's just talk to Aaron David Miller, former State Department official who has advised 6 US Secretaries of State, particularly on the Middle East and Arab-Israeli negotiations. Mr. Miller, welcome to the program.
Pleasure. How
dangerous do you think this situation is right now? Could it flare up and draw in a situation whereby we might see NATO airstrikes, something like that?
I mean, it's not like Lebanon, where this could be tripped into a regional confrontation, but clearly there's a moral imperative here. Innocent people are dying, trying to resist Gaddafi. There's an oil factor, of course, which has seen a spike in oil prices, and if it should spread, it could cause serious dislocation to the international community. But this seems to me containable, and it comes down to one basic dynamic. Gaddafi has mercenaries, he has money, he has the capacity to hold Tripoli for quite some time unless somebody, either internal Libyan opposition and or with the help of international support, dislodges him.
Okay,
so
what is
that's basically the reality, and I don't see an interventionist force right now.
But when Hillary Clinton talks about all options on the table, no option is off the table. What does that mean?
That's true.
That means that military assistance is not ruled out.
That's true. That's a convenient way of saying and ratcheting up pressure. Remember, the key here is not to change Gaddafi's calculations, presumably. Let's assume he's not leaving. The key is to change the calculations of those around him. And upping the ante with the prospects of military intervention, I just don't see why a no-fly zone at this stage is going to bring any more pressure against Gaddafi and dislodge him from Tripoli. The issue is how to get him out of his bunker. And that can only be done in 2 ways. One, you could have opposing forces enter the city, fight a pitched battle, and defeat him. Or 2, well, 2 is the possibility of assassinating him, either from within his own circle or from the outside. And no one is considering that.
Right. What about this concept of coming out of the international community, putting the full weight behind this opposition movement, and perhaps providing military aid there to enable that the siege of Tripoli to happen?
Sure, if it's done multilaterally, but I don't think the international community wants that. I think the one extraordinary thing about this transformative wave that is sweeping the Middle East is that it is legitimate and authentic, because it is not referenced in Washington or Jerusalem or New York. It's coming from indigenous forces, which means it's going to endure. No one wants to mess around with that and leave American or Western fingerprints all over this rather remarkable wave of unrest and change we're seeing.
But given the situation and all options being on the table, there's no question that Barack Obama would have a file of military options available, wouldn't he? They will have looked into this. They will have assessed what potential options there are.
Yes, as president, I'm sure he's asked for them, including a special forces option. But how realistic that is. To take that kind of action means to risk failure. And we've seen half-baked American military ideas in the Middle East, specifically the Iranian hostage operation. In 1980, you've seen what could happen. They could essentially undermine a presidency. So I think the issue now is multilateral action. It's upping the ante. It's getting unanimity from the international community in an effort to buck up the forces opposing Gaddafi and to change the calculations of those around him so that his departure could be expedited. I wouldn't rule out, by the way, the other possibility, that he puts self-preservation over martyrdom and decides to leave. Now, who would take him?
He could end up in Venezuela.
He's another, or Cuba.
Right. Okay. Aaron, David Miller, good to get your perspective. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Now, Canada has imposed its own sanctions against Libya, going further than those passed by the UN Security Council on Saturday. In addition to freezing the assets of Gaddafi, his 5 children and top associates, the Canadian government has banned any financial transactions with the Libyan government and institutions. Canadian media are reporting that the Gaddafi regime unsuccessfully tried to withdraw a substantial amount of money from several banks in Canada. Prime Minister Stephen Harper explained what was being done.
These actions will help restrict the movement of and access to money and weapons for those responsible for violence against the Libyan people. As you know, Canada also called for the referral of the situation in Libya to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to help ensure that those responsible for ordering and carrying out atrocities are held accountable.
Okay, that's it for now. We're hoping to hear more on the humanitarian situation, what the UN's doing about it a little bit later in the programme, but for now, it's back to Doha.
Let's go to Egypt now, where the public prosecutor has issued a travel ban on Hosni Mubarak and his family, pending further investigations. He's also ordered a freeze on their financial assets inside the country. Mubarak is the most high-profile and most senior official of the previous regime to have a travel ban imposed on him. Ayman Mohyeddin has more.
Forced out of office and now in the crosshairs of Egypt's Prosecutor General. On Monday, former President Hosni Mubarak and his family were banned from traveling abroad and all of their financial assets and property in Egypt frozen, pending further investigation. Mubarak and his family had reportedly accumulated billions of dollars in wealth during their 30 years in power in both domestic and foreign assets. The president's 2 sons, Ala and Gamal, were widely believed to have exploited their family ties for personal financial gains with deals in real estate, technology, and the financial markets. Shortly after Mubarak left office, Egypt's foreign ministry requested foreign governments and financial institutions to freeze all foreign assets belonging to Mubarak's family. Mubarak is now the most senior official of the previous regime, who is now under investigation for illegal activity. Similar travel bans and investigations have been launched into several top officials that served under Mubarak. And on Monday, indictments were filed against a further 3 former ministers who are now set to go on trial in early March. Holding former regime officials accountable was one of the main demands of Egypt's revolutionary movement, saying the current leadership of the country must cut all ties with the past by sending a strong signal it will prosecute Mubarak's alleged wrongdoings. While many will say this is a step in the right direction, others will undoubtedly say it's too little, too late, and that the delay in issuing such a travel ban has allowed the Mubarak family even more opportunity to hide many of the ill-gotten gains of his term in office. Ayman Mohyeddin, AlJazeera, Cairo.
Well, joining me in the studio now is Thomas Gorgisian, an Egyptian journalist and writer. First of all, I mean, this is a very significant move, isn't it? And this could be the start of a criminal investigation which sees Mubarak on trial.
It's a step in the right direction, maybe, as Ayman was telling in his report, that it's too little, too late. But as a matter of fact, it's a step, and then it's coming after other steps were taken. But always people were asking when is going to reach the top. I mean, there were people are related somehow to the president or the president's son, and they were like, their assets were frozen, and this kind of, there were a travel ban on them, and now reaching the what we call it Mubarak family, which includes, of course, his wife and the 2 sons, Ala and Gamal. In the same time, the wives of their, because somehow the wives of his sons were related with their families to businesses. So it's, as we said, in this type of things, when these things open up, it's at the tip of the iceberg, and the iceberg is there, and a lot of money is there, and we will see. I mean, it may take some weeks to figure out exactly. And this, of course, is going on in the time when there is a political process going on. People are eager to know if reform means just build the new one without getting rid of the, or...
Well, clearly, the new powers that be are trying to show that they are completely different from the old powers and that they are willing to make changes. The criticism is they didn't act fast enough, and there is some speculation that Mubarak's managed to move huge